Hi everybody. Okay, this is activity 1 for the observation assignment, exploration of the current evening sky. Right now I'm in Olympia, Washington on March 10th around 8:37 in the morning. I set it here. We are looking east. Make sure I've got the east showing. We were looking east and you can see that there is some lens flare and that there's a halo around the sun. These give you sort of a fancy picture, but sometimes they're a little they're in the way in these observations. You can remove them by going to the sun, sliding the cursor over the sun until you actually get on the sun. See, it says sun there. If I right-click Halo Effects, I can say Never, and that gets rid of the halo effects around the sun, and it also gets rid of the lens flare. Notice when you do that, Venus pops out. You can see Venus here. Now, if you view the real sky, you're not going to be able to see Venus because of the brightness of the sun does obscure it. So that's a little side note on this on observations. Let's go to part 1. It says constellations. We should begin this at sunset. The easiest way to go to sunset is go to the control panel and hit the sunset button. That will take you to sunset. Then it says we want to view west. So again, on the control panel, if you click the W, it will slide over there. If you hit the space bar, it'll go right away. Just so happens that in March we have a comet. Pan-STARRS comet is in the western sky today. Alright, then it says for us to change the time to 300. Well, there's your time flow rate. Normally when you open it up it would be at 1 real time. We'll stop it. If they want us to speed it up a little bit, so we go 300 times normal, and then we will also stop it. Okay, it says click on the constellations button. So if you have the Windows, you'll have these buttons here. There's stars. There's a constellation button right there, and you're going to want to click on that, and that will show you the constellations. At least it'll show you the stick figures of the constellations. If we select a constellation by scrolling over the label and right-clicking, and if we select that, then a picture of the constellation will show up. This is Andromeda, which was a princess. Here's Aries. We select Aries. You can see we can get the ram. Pisces. And we'll get a fish. But these stick figures are not really the constellations. Constellations are areas in the sky. There are 88 areas in the sky that are called constellations, and not all of the stars in a constellation actually lie on what we would consider a constellation, that is the stick figure. So what you can do is you go to Options, come here to Constellations, open that up, and then hit the boundaries, closing up the options, and you can see where the actual constellations are. These are 88 regions in the sky that identify all of the stars in this area, in these areas that belong to that particular constellation. Okay, so what the section 1 wants you to do is it wants you to look in the 4 directions. So if we look north, okay, we have Ursa Major. That's the big bear, or the small bear, and then we have the big bear here, and Cephas and Draco, the dragon. So you can look in the various directions and write down what you see in terms of the constellations. It includes the zenith, which is the point directly overhead. So if we push the zenith, that will go to the point directly overhead. And we've got a couple of them. There's Arugula and Lynx, Perseus, and so on. Okay, so if we go back to the west, So that's a pretty easy task. All you have to do is sort of look around and write down the various constellations that you see in the sky. Now, I sort of got ahead of you because you don't have to do the borders until part 2 of this assignment, which is the current evening sky, but you get basically the idea. What it does want you to do once we have our constellations is it wants us to identify some planets. If we can find 3 planets or other objects in the sky, that would be great. Well, obviously we've got one right here. That's a comet. But let's see if we can find 3 planets. So when we open up the find, and this was a previous search, so I'm going to delete that previous search. And you can see here that it gives us planets, and when we look over, it says what the altitude is. Now, on some of the versions, if you can't see it, then they will be dimmed out. So let's see if we go here. No. There's one that's dimmed out. I'm not sure what's going on with my particular program. But another way of determining whether or not you can see the object is by its altitude. If the altitude is positive, like here it's 61 degrees for Jupiter, for Mars it's 4.9 degrees. For Uranus it's 12.4, but for the Sun it's minus 2.6 because we're at sunset, so the Sun is below the horizon. Venus is minus 7.2, also below the horizon. So here we can't see the ones with negative altitude, but we can see the ones with a positive altitude. So let's select those. And when you do, we can see that we click the Find pane again. We can see Mars and Uranus are right in front of us. They happen to be west. Jupiter is not. If we look around, we can't really find it. Probably the easiest way to select for Jupiter is to go there, double-click on Jupiter, and it will find it for you. Go to Find, double-click on the word Jupiter, and it'll find it for you. Okay, so now we know that Jupiter is in Taurus. That's a little higher than the others, and it's a little towards the south. So there we have our 3 planets that are visible to us at this time. Now, to find out what their coordinates are, you slide the cursor over there till you get until it changes and shows you the data for Jupiter. You can see here Jupiter has an altitude. If you look real closely, under its name there's azimuth and then altitude. So under the name of the constellation Taurus. So you can see Jupiter, and then it says planet. And it says the rise, the transit, the set, and then the constellation name. Under the constellation name, you'll see the azimuth and the altitude. Now, azimuth represents the compass heading that you can find Jupiter at this moment. And north is 0, and you measure clockwise. So east is 90, south is 180, west is 270, and then back north again at 0. The altitude is just the degree measure that an object is above the horizon in the direction that you're viewing it. So we have an azimuth is 208 degrees, 38.508 minutes. That's the direction that you can find Jupiter at here at 7:20 on March 10th. Its altitude is 61 degrees, 61 degrees 2.37 minutes. So that's its altitude. Now you can also find information about Jupiter by going over here to the 2 places. One is you go to the Find and you click on the eye, and that will give you some information about Jupiter. Okay. If you go to the options, the info pane, and look at it, you'll notice that this is for Uranus. All right. It turns out that the the program will display information for the object that was selected most recently. So we selected Uranus most recently. If we deselect that, deselect Jupiter, and reselect Jupiter, then what will happen when we go to the info pane, Jupiter is the object that we have our information for. And we can find its position in sky here, and you can here then look at its azimuth and its altitude, and these will be the same as they were by just sliding the cursor over Jupiter itself and letting the display show it to you. Alright, so let's go ahead and enable Uranus again so that we can see it. So it's up to you to get data on 3 objects. If this is a time of year where you don't have 3 planets, then you can also look for asteroids or comets that may up there, or dwarf planets, space missions. Find some object up there that you can look for. Okay. Now we're going to take a look, and I'm going to disable the constellations. I'm going to look west. And I'm going to hit the Run Time Forward button. And we're just going to take a look and notice that the sky appears to rotate. And this, of course, is because the Earth is rotating on its axis. And if we take a look at any particular object, say let's take a look at this one here, Menker. Notice that it stays within its constellation, but that it makes an angle. It moves a sort of a straight line with an angle like this, going down towards the west. See how it looks like it moves forward? And with planets, you can actually have the system draw the local path. So if we check local path here on Jupiter and then start it up again, the system will draw a path for you. So it's very clear right now that all of the stars and Jupiter as a planet are moving in the same direction, and you can see that this is really pointing at an angle which points towards the south or southwest. Okay, and we'll remove that local path, and it'll disappear for us. Then it tells us to take a look at the east. And if you want to speed it up, hit the space bar and it'll go right to it. And we can click play again. Let's take a look at this here, this Arcturus. And notice that Arcturus also rises. Oh, I'm sorry. In this case, since we're looking east, we see that the stars are rising rather than setting. And if you put an imaginary line, you can see that that imaginary line is pointing to the southeast, or pointing to the right. On the western side, the angle appears to be pointing to the left. Here it appears to be pointing to the right. Now, the magnitudes of the angle are the same, but the directions are different, so you have a difference there. And so you need to think about why it is that the position of Arcturus. Let's see if we can find Arcturus again. There it is. It's a very bright star. And if you take a look at its position here, the azimuth is 125 degrees. Its altitude is 51. If I let it run for a while and try to select it, notice that the azimuth and altitude change because the azimuth and altitude are fixed relative to our position on Earth. It's a coordinate system that's fixed to where the observer is. And so it changes. But notice that Arcturus stays in its constellation over a period of one night. It's not going to change because it is moving, but it's so far away that we don't see the motion. It's certainly not far enough away for it to move out of the constellation in one night. Okay, so I think that it will help you. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask me.